All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight we have a very special sponsored stream. Shout out to Austin. We are going to be diving into the very popular comic book Prometheus by Alan Moore, the famous occultist and comic book author. For those of you who are just with me, apparently Streamlabs had a total blackout. I was streaming, you saw about the first 13 minutes, and then everything on my end just totally went black. And I was like, can you guys see me? Can you guys see me? And then I couldn't log in. I couldn't do anything. I thought maybe I was banned, but turns out, God willing, I am not banned from Streamlabs. What happened is they had a total blackout. So guys, if you're back with me, I apologize. Please smash that like if you could. I promise you, we have an incredibly insightful and interesting stream tonight. Now, I am not a comic book reader. Never really got into them. Austin hit me up, wanted to sponsor a stream. He said, hey, brother, I like comic books, and there's one particular comic book I'd love for you to read. It's called Promethea. It is by Alan Moore. Now, I already knew Alan Moore because I used to be really interested in his stuff, specifically his theories of magic. Well, it turns out this particular comic book, Promethea, is basically Alan Moore putting his entire spiritual, semi-religious, magical practice and whatnot in one single comic book. So we are going to basically do a full deconstruction of that paradigm and looking at the theology, his understanding of, well, it's replete with feminism. I mean, just by the name, Promethea is actually a feminine take on Prometheus, the Greek god that stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity. Well, that's exactly what Promethea is about. Promethea is basically a feminist take on Prometheus. In fact, it brings the fire of understanding, metaphysical understanding into existence. It's about her awareness and how her awareness becomes our awareness of the sort of magical world, the role of the imagination, what Alan Moore calls the immateria, and how it relates to the material world. So this is what we're going to be diving into. I basically have a full overview of that paradigm of his theology, his understanding of God, his feminist message, the role and function of magic within the comic book, the role of the imagination, the power of tarot, and of course, Sephiroth in the Tree of Life, because the basic framework of this comic is that this young girl named Sophie Bangs, who, again, I'll explain even her name and why Alan Moore went with that name. Guys, please smash that like if you could. I greatly appreciate it. Again, I apologize for the stream just going out. It appears that Streamlabs went down and it totally wrecked the beginning stream, and I apologize. We had everybody here. We had the likes up over 50 before I even started. So anyways, I also have multiple videos of Alan Moore. So what we're going to do with the first half of this stream is basically provide a total overview of the comic Promethea, how it is embedded with all these sort of magical understandings of the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, because Sophie Bangs, who she realizes that she is Promethea, of which she is able to be sort of possessed by this goddess figure, if you will, through her imagination. It's tied with aspects of sigil magic. It's tied with aspects of the role of the imagination. And so it's very interesting that only Orthodox Christian theology is really going to provide us an understanding of how the imagination works in relation to spiritual possession, in relationship to the devil, demons, these types of things. And so I would say that's probably the closest overlap between these two, the sort of magical Alan Moore paradigm and our Orthodox paradigm, because this particular comic is certainly anti-Christian. I mean, right from the beginning, it sort of takes place in the year 411 AD in Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria, Egypt was a place replete with sort of perennial understandings of spirituality and magic and Platonic philosophy. And so this man, he's murdered by these evil Christians, which of course are portrayed as basically medieval Catholic monks. I mean, but So this whole comic book is very anti-Christian. It's very anti-Christian, and you see this over and over again. And what's really funny is Jesus and Jesus Christ is taken in vain multiple times. Basically, every other page has somebody yelling Christ or Jesus Christ in a sort of derogatory way, as if they're surprised or something. So taking the Lord's name in vain, very common within this comic book. But it's built upon many of the Crowleyan concepts of magic as the fullness of science. And so, again, as I lay out his understanding of magic within this comic book is basically the fulfillment of the scientific process itself, because magic not only deals with the material world, i.e. science, but it deals with the immaterial world, the imaginary world, the spiritual world. And so I'm going to lay all that out. And then, like I said, I have all these videos of Alan Moore basically talking about his own religion. Now, he worships an ancient god named Litecoin. So, for those of you who don't know, he has a spiritual practice in which he worships a very ancient snake god called Litecoin, Alan Moore, and so he is we'll get into it. He has a very interesting and eclectic spiritual worldview. So before we get going, again, I want to get into this whole thing. I don't know how long this stream's going to go because I have so many videos I want to share with you guys, including one by another comic book author, Grant Morrison, talking about sigil magic, because really, once you understand this comic, which is really, again, all of Alan Moore's spiritual magical practices put into one comic, of which then you journey through his entire paradigm as Sophie Bangs, moving again into the spiritual realm through the Sephiroth, from one Sephiroth to another. This is really a sort of sigil magic itself. You see, a sigil is taking a concept and, something in the imagination, a desire, and then putting it into three-dimensional space, two-dimensional space by writing it down. And so the entire comic, I would argue, is itself a sigil. And so we're going to listen to Grant Morrison talk about sigil magic and talk about how all his comics were in fact sigils, and that girls he wanted to date, the way that he wanted to perceive himself, he would embed these into his comic so that then they would become real life. So we're going to get into all that stuff. Guys, please smash that like if you could. I want to just do a few quick announcements. First one, guys, is I am live over on Rumble. So if any of you guys would like to join some viewers over on Rumble, looks like we got 2 people over on Rumble. You can do so right here. Graphic novel. Well, I call it a comic book. Dr. Crispy. So anyways, if you guys would like to support Church of the Eternal Logos, the best way you can support my work is to become a website member. You can do so with this link right here. There's 3 different types of memberships, of which I just filmed a new video for members that will be up on the website tomorrow, called The Jesuit Caves. How many of you guys know of these sort of esoteric Jesuit caves in the South Holland or the Netherlands, right on the border between Belgium, where apparently since 1704 to about 1840, there was this quarry that was like 45 meters or something under the ground. And the Jesuit monks that lived in the area began to construct Babylonian sculptures, Egyptian sculptures, basically Egyptian Islamic places of worship, all underground. Very interesting stuff. Again, I go and talk a little bit about that in a members-only video that'll be up on the website tomorrow. If you'd like access to some of that stuff, please become a website member. Also, we do fitness memberships on the first Monday of every month. And of course, we have premium membership. Shout out to some of the premium members, such as Thomas Henderson here in the live chat. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. I would greatly appreciate that. We have one-on-one sessions every Wednesday. Shout out to George. It was a pleasure chatting with you today. God bless, brother. It was a pleasure catching up, and really good to hear that you and the family are doing well. Also, if anybody else would like to sponsor a stream, again, I want to give a very special shout out to Austin for sponsoring this stream. Like I said, I don't really read comics, never read comics. However, I do have an appreciation for the medium after diving into this comic book. So at first he said, I'd love for you to read books 1 through 5. Oh, okay, great. Well, when I got onto the comic book app to read these things, I assumed that was issues 1 through 5. So I prepared everything, read that, kind of had my deconstruction. He goes, oh no, sorry, 1 through 5, each book is actually 5 to 6 issues. Okay, so actually, it was sort of a blessing that Jay was streaming last night, because that gave me time to basically bust my ass and read all those comics and look at, again, this general worldview. So if you also have a topic that you'd like for me to dive into, do research on, feel free to support, but also purchase a sponsored stream with the link right here. I would greatly appreciate that. Again, a special shout out to Austin for tonight's stream. I do appreciate your support, brother, and I do appreciate the topic, because you were right. This comic book, or as Dr. Crispy like to say, this graphic novel, is an incredible resource for sort of trampolining into a discussion on tarot, on Kabbalah, on the imagination, on spiritual possession, all these things, and looking at them from an Orthodox frontum, an Orthodox worldview. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Without further ado, now let's get straight into the topic. And so what I want to do first is kind of give you a general overview of this comic. I thought I'll start rambling into detail, so I thought the best thing we could do is first just read an overview, and then I can get into sort of deconstructing the paradigm itself. So here is, as you can see, Glycon. This is actually the deity that Alan Moore worships, Glycon. But give me a second. Let's first read about the comic and a sort of general plot summary and overview of Sophie Bangs and her adventures as Promethea, and then I'll get into all these different general aspects of the paradigm that I'd like to share with you guys. So Promethea, as I said, is a comic book series created by Alan Moore and J.H. Williams III. And I'd have to say, the art is really, really good. So here's just a sample of what the comic book looks like. The art is really good. This was written in 1999, but it has a very contemporary feel to it. Again, the art is really good. I'd have to agree with some of the other critics that have looked at this. Again, here's a depiction of the apocalypse, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because as we'll see, that is the basis of this comic. Okay, let's get an overview so you actually know what we're talking about, because I'm sure a lot of you guys have not read this comic. So Promethea is a comic book series created by Alan Moore, who's a famous occultist and magician, and J.H. Williams III and Mick Gray, published by America's Best Comics / Wild Storm. It tells the story of Sophie Bangs, a college student from an alternate futuristic New York City in 1999. This is basically like The Fifth Element. You got flying taxis and stuff like that, who embodies the powerful entity known as Promethea. Promethea, again, obviously the feminine version of Prometheus, and we can discuss him if you guys would like to. Originally published as 32 issues from 1999 to 2005, the series has been republished into 5 graphic novels and 1 hardback issue. Moore weaves in elements of magic and mysticism, along with the superhero mythology and action, spirituality, and the afterlife, particularly the Tree of Life, which is central because as Sophie Bangs, again, through the imagination becoming possessed by the entity Promethea, who again, the point is that she's bringing the fire of metaphysical understanding. That's really her role as a character, but she is a sort of timeless goddess, if you will, from the ancient period. that Promethea includes a wide-ranging experimentation of visual styles and art. And I would say the visuals are really, really good. The symbolism, even though it's incredibly replete with magic and things that we wouldn't agree with, very, very good. But what's interesting, too, it's in 1999, and we see homosexuality, transgenderism, extreme forms of feminism. All this stuff is replete within this comic. So in the 5th century AD, again, what I said, 411 AD is when this comic starts, a Christian mob threatens the home of a magician in Hellenistic Egypt. He tells his daughter Promethea to flee into the desert, hoping the gods of the ancient world will preserve her. The story shifts to New York City in the late 20th century. Sophie Bangs is hoping to interview a woman named Barbara Shelley for a college paper on Promethea, a character who seems to recur in literature and pop culture through the centuries. Shelley is hostile to her and warns that you don't want to go looking for folklore, and especially you don't want folklore to come looking for you. And this is going to relate to really Alan Moore's understanding of symbols, the role of symbols, semiotics in the imagination, and how the imagination is for him this collective realm in which we all participate. And so these fictional characters, this is part of magic itself, these fictional characters are more real or just as real as things that we would consider here right now that you could smell, taste, and touch. After departing, Sophie is tracked and attacked by a creature known as a Smee, which is a sort of all black, sort of a swamp-like creature, if you will. Obviously a sort of demon in this world, even though I would argue this whole thing is demonic. Just as things look bleakest for Sophie, she is rescued by Barbara, who is Promethea, right? Who has the mystical powers and is now dressed as Promethea. She informs Sophie that the only reason she would be attacked is if someone suspects she will become the next vessel of Promethea, and Barbara is the current one. It turns out that Promethea is called to the world when she uses their imagination to make her real. As they hide from the pursuing Smee, the weakened and fatally injured Barbara instructs Sophie to write a poem about Promethea, hoping Sophie is indeed the successor, and the creative expression is a way to get Sophie in the correct state of mind to allow herself to become Promethea. Barbara's idea works, and from that night, Sophie, having defeated the Smee, becomes the next Promethea. And this is a really interesting thing, and part of this sort of role of the imagination and possession is that it's entirely for Sophie to become Promethea, this goddess figure, the superhero feminist figure. She has to write down. She has to start writing things, again, taking things from the imagination and making them real. This is going to be tied to, again, aspects of sigil magic, which we'll watch here when Grant Morrison starts talking about magic and sigil magic and all this type of stuff. So we're going to get to how this is not just part of the comic, but this is what Alan Moore actually believes in his own spiritual practice, is that you can basically summon these imaginative entities, demons, and we'll get into the Lesser Key of Solomon, the 72 demons, all this different stuff is presented here in this work. The story with Sophie / Promethea, learning about Promethea and the previous individuals who have in the past been the vessels of Promethea. In the days that follow, the hospital where Barbara lies is attacked by demons, and an act that leads to Barbara's death. And this really then is the catalyst for much of this comic, because Sophie Bangs as Promethea, now she has to go explore this sort of immateria. That's what it's called, the realm of the imagination, the non-physical, the spiritual realm, this realm in which we participate in divinity for Alan Moore. So Sophie Bangs then has to explore this realm to go find Barbara. And this is her moving through, as we'll learn about, the tarot cards, the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life itself. And again, I have a whole thing I've written out on how this Tree of Life, how the tarot, the role of magic, all this stuff plays out in this comic. So in the days that follow, so Barbara's death, This motivates Sophie to learn about magic, mysticism, and the tree of life and its spheres in order to find Barbara and help her seek Steve Shelley, Barbara's dead husband. Now, here's the interesting thing is that Sophie Bangs, Sophie Wisdom, Bangs actually comes from this gentleman. I looked up, why does Alan Moore call her Sophie Bangs? Well, he calls her Sophie Bangs based on this guy right here, John Kendrick Bangs. Now I was thinking, okay, John Kendrick Bangs, he was a lawyer, he was an editor of Life magazine, Harper magazine, and then he was a sort of a satirist, a comic. He wrote things like that. So I was thinking, why would he choose that? And then I started looking things up, and what I found was, that John Kendrick Bangs, he was noted for writing what's called Bangsian fantasy. And these Bangsian fantasy stories take place in a dream world where the characters can interact with literary figures and historical figures. Exactly the premise of the Promethea comic book or the graphic novel, however you want to talk about it. So John Kendrick Bangs, Sophie Bangs, Wisdom Bangs. Why is she the main protagonist? Why? Because Sophie Wisdom, as he talks about, there's a line in it that wisdom is an eternal archetype. Wisdom is an eternal archetype. Now, again, we're going to eventually deconstruct and criticize some of this stuff, but John Kendrick Bangs developed a what's called Bangsian fantasy, in which people move into a dream realm, and then they can engage with both fictional and historical people. And Bangs also wrote a number of works that satirize the conversations of fantasy literature and his imaginary conversations and such. So now it makes sense, because Alan Moore, the main protagonist, is, again, the archetype of wisdom. Wisdom then moving through this entire metaphysical understanding of tarot, the tree of life, magical practices, possession, ancient gods and goddesses, all this different stuff in this Bangsian fantasy structure. That's why she's Sophie Bangs. It took me a minute to figure all that out, but once I did, it made a lot more sense. So moving back, she then is going to find Barbara, who is seeking Steve Shelley, her dead husband. Throughout their climb up the spheres of the tree of life, Sophie, i.e. Promethea, again, the main protagonist here, and Barbara encountered difficulties such as imprisonment by the demon Asmodeus, as well as meeting figures such as Sophie's father, Juan, who died when she was little, Barbara's guardian angel, Boo Boo, and Promethea's father, who she has not seen since his murder in 411 AD. So what we see here is that the beginning of this comic is that Sophie Bangs is not the main. What we see is it's this old man telling his daughter, who turns out to be Promethea. So Promethea, who this goddess figure is this little girl who her dad, he's getting ready to be killed by these evil Christians. And so he tells his daughter to run away. The gods will protect you. And so she runs out into the desert, and multiple issues later, you find out that she runs and she meets Thoth and Hermes. And again, who are they? They're the magician gods. They're the wisdom gods. They're the language gods. Again, motifs that are essential, because what you see here with their sigil understanding, how, again, moving flash forward, that's 5th century, moving fast forward to the 20th century, Sophie Bangs can become Promethea, one, she's chosen, but two, through the word. By writing the words, the word becomes incarnate in this magical understanding, right? And so there's a sort of recapitulation of Sophie Bangs also not having her father there. He left, or some. We'll find out. I believe it was her father eventually died. And when she goes into these altered realms, she meets her father. And this is, again, like Promethea meeting her father. There's a recapitulation. Again, what Moore's trying to say is that time and history are sort of fractal, right? The patterns repeat at scale. And so anyways, so Promethea is this little girl who then is sort of adopted by the Egyptian gods and learns the ways of magic. And she's this superhero woman who appears in World War I, right? When the young boys that are in the trenches of World War I and they're crying for their mom, who comes to save them? It's Promethea. It's not God. It's not Jesus Christ. All that stuff, that doesn't exist. That's not real, but it's Promethea. It's this feminized understanding of the superhero who's super independent, super strong. She can beat up everybody. And again, we'll get into, I started thinking about, every time I see these sort of, and there's very multiple sexual images. So what I was going to say is Promethea sleeps with a guy named Jim Faust, who's a magician, to gain the knowledge of this sort of ulterior world. And this is this Faustian bargain, right? Everybody knows Faust, the story of Faust. And so Moore embeds this within this comic, in that Faust, there is a Faustian pact, a Faustian bargain, that Promethea, i.e. Sophie Bangs, has to sleep with this very old, fat, ugly magician who then he can do magic, and he appears youthful and handsome and articulate and good looking, but really it's magic. It's fake. But he sleeps with her. He basically says, well, I'll show you how magic works if you sleep with me. Again, she agrees to it. This is this Faustian bargain. And so she's able to acquire the knowledge of the magical realm, of the immateria, of the tree of life, of the tarot, of all this different stuff by sleeping with Jim Faust. Again, you see the symbolism there. So eventually Barbara and Steve find each other and are reincarnated as twins, who Sophie ends up looking after at the end of the book. Having been gone a whole summer, Sophie is unaware that the FBI has been tracking Promethea and want to take her into custody for the events Promethea has caused throughout the years. Moments before the FBI arrives, Sophie's mother instructs her to run away, as Promethea's father had centuries earlier. Now, this is another thing. Again, there's a video, because when I was researching all this stuff after reading it, there's a video. I don't know if I have it ready or not. We'll be watching it. But Alan Moore talks about sort of conspiracy theories, and that he did research on the CIA and all this different stuff. In the comic, the FBI is presented as this, again, the intelligence agency, the powers of the world that be, that are trying to suppress her feminism and the power, the feminine power, magic, the understanding of magic, when in reality, that's the exact opposite, right? You think that the intelligence agencies, you don't think the powers that be actually celebrate this stuff? I mean, just look around. So there's this false sort of adversarial relationship between the intelligence agencies and Promethea, this understanding of magic, the wisdom of the tarot and the tree of life, and feminist powers of sex and all this different stuff, independence. These intelligence agencies are totally in favor of that. So there's a sort of false adversarial relationship there. 3 years pass. This is at the very end of this whole comic book. 3 years pass, and Sophie, having abandoned her duties as Promethea, hides in Millennium City under the alias of Joey Estrada with her new boyfriend Carl. However, after being found by the FBI and Tom Strung, Sophie reluctantly becomes Promethea and in turn carries out the final task, bringing about the end of the world. So let me talk to you a little bit again about my notes here then. The apocalypse. The apocalypse is the central understanding of this comic, because Jim Faust, the first meeting of Sophie Bangs as Promethea, when he's first introduced as a character in this library, Jim Faust explains to Promethea that her role is to bring about the end of the world. Again, the apocalypse. So again, we see this sort of flip on Jesus Christ. We see this flip on the Alpha and the Omega, is that it's actually Promethea. And what you find is that the apocalypse is a thing that happens in the imagination. The apocalypse is this thing that happens over and over again because the universe itself is cyclical. There is no beginning and end. And that this is the role. So in the Promethea comic series, the apocalypse, this is what I wrote, is portrayed as a catastrophic event that will bring about the end of the world as we know it. The series explores the idea that the apocalypse is not just a physical event, but also a spiritual and psychological event. The series presents the idea of the apocalypse as not just an external event, but also an internal event, and the process that occurs within each person. Promethea's role in the apocalypse is to bring about the end of the world and bring about a new world. The series presents the idea that Promethea is not just a physical being, but a spiritual and, as I said, psychological being. This series sort of presents the idea that it's not just a person, but it's a process. And she is the process of imagination itself that is taking place in each person. This is sort of this fractal magical understanding that Moore is working with. And so Promethea's role in the apocalypse, as I said, is to bring about the end of the world, which is really just an external it's not just an external event, but an internal event that's happening in every single person. So then Promethea's role, like I said, is to bring about this through this imagination, the immateria, as Alan Moore calls it. And so so I want to then introduce to you guys some of these characters. So here's some of the reference and criticisms. So the series has been both criticized for acting as a mouthpiece for Moore's philosophical views and praised for the beauty of its artwork and innovation regarding the medium itself. And I will agree that the art of this comic is actually very beautiful. The colors, the way that it's laid out. That's what I even told Austin. Again, shout out to Austin for sponsoring this stream, that I'm not a comic book reader, but I do appreciate the medium because, you know, it's very interesting when you read the comics, because you're basically looking at a page, but multiple things are happening at once. It's sort of a breakdown in linear time when you're looking at a comic. And so these graphic novels, especially this one with the beautiful art, you're looking at multiple things that are happening at once with the thought bubbles, with the conversations. And so I do appreciate the medium. Regarding the first claim, the series is, by Moore's own admission, didactic. There are 1,000 comic books on the shelves that don't contain a philosophy lecture, and one that does. Isn't there room for that one? While the Kabbalah story arc and the positive explanations of more philosophy very explicitly explain the talking head style, the symbolism behind the details of every plane of existence. Promethea also contains critiques of materialism, which are much more subtle. The material world is generally portrayed as having become immersed in commercialism, materialism, fetishism of science, and the trendy postmodernist chic. Moore uses a recurring series of billboards, fictional celebrity references, and all other advertisements and news. And this, again, moves through the entire comic as sort of the propaganda, the neoteny of the official narrative systems of the world, which, again, I wouldn't disagree with. However, I take umbrage with Moore because I would argue that the powers that be, the propaganda of the world, the narratives that we're embedded in, are all in favor of his sort of feminist empowerment, pro-homosexual, magical understanding of self-divinization, all this different stuff. Psychedelics. There's also subtle references and artistic presentations of psychedelics themselves. This is also presented in here. As suggested by the title Promethea, which implies the feminine version of the mythological Prometheus, the title also participates in the subgenre of feminism in superhero comics. And so let me tell you a little bit about what I wrote down in regards to the presentation of feminism in this comic. Where did I write those notes? So the series promotes a feminist message in several ways. One, if the main ways, is through the portrayal of the character Promethea as a powerful and independent woman. Promethea is not just a physical embodiment of the goddess, but also a representation of the power and potential of all women themselves. Sophie, again, Wisdom, the main character who becomes Promethea, is also portrayed as strong, intelligent, independent woman who takes control of her own destiny. And that's part of her even sleeping with Jim Faust for the attainment of magical knowledge, right? The idea of a traditional worldview as Christians, where we promote, again, female purity, that means not engaging in sexual acts for power, especially youthfulness, this type of stuff, certainly not portrayed as an advantage in this comic. The idea that you can beat those dudes' ass and you can have sex where you want and you can have these lesbian experiences celebrated in the comic. The series also explores the idea that women have been traditionally marginalized and oppressed in society. And there's multiple references to this, and that they have the potential to be powerful and influential if they are given the opportunity. The series also explores the idea that women have been traditionally excluded from the realm of the imagination and creativity, generally speaking, and that they have the potential to be just as creative and imaginative as men. Another way the series promotes the feminist message is through the portrayal of the female characters as complex, nuanced, and multi-dimensional. Now, I have a video where Alan Moore talks about how he likes to make three-dimensional characters as opposed to one-dimensional and what he calls two-dimensional characters. And that's why we see in this comic Promethea him creating these multi-dimensional characters. The series also explores the idea that women have been, the series also explores the idea that women have been reduced to stereotypes and that they have the potential to be more than just a sort of singular stereotype of what a woman should be. Additionally, the series also explores the idea that femininity is not just a biological characteristic. Now, again, this is 1999. We're in 2023, and we already know about the transgender agenda and all these different things. But it also promotes the idea that it's not just a biological characteristic, femininity, it's also a cultural construct, and it can be understood and embraced in different ways by different people, including a gay man who's the only man to be, quote unquote, Promethea, this goddess. So I think it's from, I think he has him from like 1930s to the 1960s or something. He's the longest acting Promethea, is this gay guy, who, again, is in touch with his artistic and creative and feminine self, highlighting, again, the sort of plurality of gender expression and femininity. I mean, it also leads into a sort of lesbian relationship where we see a sort of transgenderism. There's one, again, the gay man who's Promethea. As when he is Promethea, he's this sexy Arab woman with big boobs and a sexy figure, and she's so strong and powerful. And he has a relationship with a mortal man. And when that mortal man finds out that he's actually in love with another man, he kills that dude. That's part of the comic. So he actually shoots him in the head, I believe, and kills him once he finds out that Promethea, this super sexual Arab goddess that he's having sex with, is actually a dude who's gay. And so this is part of the narrative. And you see this is playing out, this is laying out the sort of alchemical understanding of the world itself and our ability as gods to create it. So the series also explores the idea that traditional gender roles and norms are not natural, but they're immutable and rather social constructs that can be challenged and changed. Okay, so that's part of the feminist message that, again, is laying out of why this is a subgenre of feminism in superhero comics. And making his lead character an aspiring poet whose words conjure the malleable form of a literary goddess, as well as the nonlinear narratives and references to literary theory and alternative philosophy, Moore's thematics are closely aligned with the countercultural theory of politics. Subjects dealt with in this series include the occult, the tarot, Hermetic, Kabbalah. The comic is laden with mythological and mystical symbolism, drawing on many religious and cultural references. Real people who appear in Promethea include Aleister Crowley, John Dee, Austin Osman Spare, and who I highlighted, John Kendrick Bangs, who, again, is distantly related to Sophie Bangs. But it took me a minute to figure out why Kendrick Bangs. Why would he be related to Sophie Bangs when he was just this editor for these magazines? It's due to that genre. Remember, it was called Bangsian fantasy. The idea, it's a whole literary genre where the characters enter into a dream world where they can engage with both fictional and historical figures. And January 2018, DC Comics the owner of the America's Best Comics, introduced Promethea into its mainstream continuity by way of the comic Justice League of America. The controversial storyline involved Promethea assisting various superheroes in fighting a villain called the Queen of Fables. Artist J.H. Williams III was reported as having no prior knowledge of the introduction of the character into DC Comics' broader continuity, and is quoted as saying, "I can't in good conscience condone this happening in any form at all." Now, here's the characters of the comic. Promethea. Promethea, as I said, is a young girl whose father is killed by a Christian mob in Alexandria in 411 AD, which is so interesting because, again, the way the art is presented, they look like medieval, like Franciscan friars or something. Totally a chronological, right? It totally misplaced, but nonetheless, after escaping the mob alone in the desert, she is taken in hand by the god Thoth Hermes. Again, magical deity, wisdom deity, gods of language, gods of messages, gods of art. Remember, again, all part of this sort of sigil magical practice that this comic is based off of, who tells her that if she goes with him/them into the immateria, the imagination, the non-physical realm. Again, for more, there's basically two realms that we are like a hybrid creature, mankind. This is sort of his anthropology presented in this comic, is that we have one foot in the materia, in the historical, and then we have one foot in the immaterial, or the imaginal, the imagination itself, which is then ahistorical because all of history is happening there, right? Time breaks down inside the imagination. A plane of existence home to the imagination. She will no longer be just a little girl, but a story living eternally. This is who then Promethea is. And then that is why then people within history, Sophie Bangs, Barbara Shelley, they can then begin to write about Promethea, again, engaging in this sigil practice, creating these imaginal landscapes, tapping into the immateria, and then Promethea can then enter into them as historical people. And this is the fusing of the materia and the immateria. It's happening through a voluntary act of the imagination, which we'll get to, and how Orthodoxy does actually believe this can be the case. So we're actually not disagreeing with Moore here. Now, the whole premise of his comic would be disagreeing with, but the idea that through the imagination we are tapping into or have access to non-local entities is a part of Orthodox theology. And so Promethea thereafter manifests through a series of individuals or vessels who have channeled her energy through the power of imagination. Since the incident with the little girl in Alexandria, there have been 8 known Promethea vessels. 6 are characters in the story, and the other 2 are told as 2 individuals, 1 Christian and 1 Muslim, who live during the Crusades and fight each other. As there should only be 1 active Promethea at any one moment in history, the fight causes Promethea great pain, something that is repeated when Stacia Grace fights Sophie Promethea. And this, we'll get into it. It could be argued that there is a 9th Promethea vessel, Stacia Vandiver. However, Stacia is only a vessel for Grace Branagh, a dead woman who once herself was Promethea, not the original little girl. Okay, so here's Sophie Bangs, the main protagonist. The protagonist of the series, Sophie, becomes Promethea after tracing the character's history and literature for a college paper. Her personality as Sophie is initially somewhat timid. By the end of the book, she becomes an adept magician and confident young woman. Again, she sleeps with that magician Faust, who, again, she begins the sexual act as Promethea, but by the end of the sexual act, she's just the little girl Sophie. And so she has to deal with the fact, oh my God, I just slept with this old, ugly, hideous magician for knowledge of Kabbalah and tarot and conjuration and all this other stuff. Okay. So she is the most powerful Promethea to date. And so that's how she brings about the apocalypse, this breakdown of historical time and the imagination. That's what Moore's trying to highlight, is that the apocalypse itself is the breakdown between historical material and ahistorical immateria, the imagination. She is the most powerful Promethea to date and the only one to not have been killed during her time as Promethea. She changes her name to Joey after running away to Millennium City to escape the FBI and her duties as Promethea. Okay, here's the other important one. the wife of comic book writer Stephen Shelley, Barbara became Promethea when her husband began projecting Barbara's characteristics into the Promethea character in his comics. During her passage in the afterlife, Barbara meets her guardian angel, Boo Boo, Barbara's old nickname, who is in fact the younger, beautiful, and independent young woman she used to be. By the time she finds her husband, she and Boo Boo become one person. Now, there's another instance in this story, I forget which issue it is. It's one of the earlier issues. I think it's the fourth issue or something, that it talks about one of these other, I forget, I think it was Anna, was another one of these women who was Promethea, and it describes this man. This is back in like the 1700s, and he's married, and he's sort of a poet. He writes poetry, and he writes about fairies, and he is losing inspiration. But you know, the young maiden who helps him and his wife at the house, oh, her beauty sort of revivifies the author. And so he begins to write about Promethea, this fairy Promethea, talking about Anna, the woman that works for him and his wife. Of course, when his wife leaves town, he ends up sleeping with her. They fall in love. The wife leaves him, and then they try to have a baby. But because, again, what he fell in love with is the imagination of Anna, they really can't have a real baby. She ends up dying, and the whole thing goes to pot. But this sort of theme, this thematic theme, is laden throughout the comic. Okay, Sophie's best friend Stacia. This is sort of Sophie's best friend, and she's always calling Sophie a lesbo. You're a lesbo. You're a lesbo. Of which, again, we find out that Stacia, in the end, has a sort of lesbian experience with Grace, and so Stacia. I think what Moore's trying to highlight there is that the people who call other people gay are actually gay. That's what I think Alan Moore is trying to highlight, because as Sophie Bangs is Promethea, whatever she does, her friend Stacia is always calling her a lesbo. You're a lesbian. You're a lesbian. And then turns out that Stacia ends up having a lesbianic experience towards the end of the comic. Anyway, Sophie's best friend Stacia is an extremely cynical and sarcastic college student. During an attack at the hospital she was visiting Sophie in, Sophie uses Stacia as a vessel for Grace Branagh to help the fight. While Sophie journeyed to find Barbara in the afterlife, again through the Tree of Life, the Kabbalah, the Sephirot, Stacia Grace were reinstated to temporarily serve as the acting Promethea, leading Stacia and Grace to fall in love. After Sophie's return, Stacia and Grace refused to relinquish the Promethea title, but were forced to by a court hearing in the Immateria. After the apocalypse, Stacia and former FBI agent Ball become lovers, while Stacia still has sexual liaisons with Grace in the Immateria. So this got me looking. While I was reading this comic, I was like, geez, there's all this lesbian stuff, all this sort of insinuation of sex, and again, the Faustian bargain of Sophie Bangs having sex with Jim Faust. I was thinking, I wonder if Alan Moore has participated in these sexual. Turns out, sure enough, he has. Now, he keeps a lot of his personal life private. However, it turns out Alan Moore's first wife, him and her had a mutual girlfriend. So his wife then was obviously bisexual. They were probably having threesomes, all this type of stuff. He had daughters with this first wife, and then the first wife ends up leaving Alan Moore with the girlfriend. So his first wife leaves Alan for their mutual girlfriend and takes their daughters with him. Now I believe he's remarried or something, but it made a whole lot of sense, because while I had to look it up, I was like halfway through the series, I was like, Alan Moore has to be engaged in some of this sexual stuff. There's no way, like there's too much sexual innuendos and all this stuff. Turns out, yes, in fact, it is. So I connected that dot as well. Okay, Grace Branagh, an illustrator who created a series of covers for pulp magazine fantasy stories about Promethea, which were written by several writers under the pseudonym Marto Neptura. Branagh was the most proficient fighter of the Prometheas. She held the Promethea mantle from 1920 to 1939. In a text article, Promethea 1, Branagh's style is compared to that of Weird Tales illustrator Margaret Brundage. Okay, Jack Faust. So Jack Faust is a magician who first approaches Sophie in order to confuse her during her first days as Promethea. Jack is first seen as a handsome young man, but is actually revealed to be an older, balding, overweight magician. Jack promises to teach Sophie magic if she, in her Promethea form, agrees to have sex with him, and she does. At first, Sophie declines, but later agrees, knowing this knowledge will help her travel in the afterlife and help Barbara. And so this, again, I believe more uses the sexual experience to talk about the tarot. So he talks about how the breast of the goddess nourished the physical, emotional, and spiritual, that the milk of Nuit is a sort of star goddess in Egyptian mythology, is the Milky Way galaxy itself. So the Milky Way, our galaxy, is actually the breast milk of the sort of astral goddess. That's what it is. And he talks about how the vagina is the Holy Grail. And then as Jim Faust, this old man's having sex with his young girl, the penis, he explains to her, is the magic wand of the magician, and that it penetrates the mystery, again, the vulvic mystery of the feminine. And so this has to do with magic, sex, and kundalini. And so he talks about Jack Faust. Well, he doesn't actually come or anything. He kind of retains his semen because he's participating in the elevation of his kundalini energy. Okay. Now, here's Bill Walcott. Here's the gay man who portrays Promethea. So the only man to assume the role of Promethea, Bill Walcott, as a gay comic artist who became Promethea by drawing her. Again, you see the sigil relationship, the sigil magic of this whole comic. He was the longest lasting Promethea from 1939 to 1969 and acted as a science hero in the ABC universe with Tom Strong during that period. Bill/Promethea resembles a 1960s version of Wonder Woman. Bill was shot in the head by Promethea's lover, FBI agent Dennis Drucker, who reacted violently when he discovered that his lover was, in a manner of speaking, transgender. Drucker spent several decades in a insane asylum, tortured by guilt for having killed his transgender Promethea, while Bill, the gay man who acted as Promethea, spent similar time in the immaterial, in the imaginary realm, blaming, again, himself, for not having told the truth. The two are reunited during the apocalypse. Oh, how wonderful. Okay, this is Anna. This is the one where the 1970s man who Promethea's likeness onto his housemaid Anna, transforming her into his dream lover. This Promethea bore a child, but the baby evaporated on birth, since in a sense it was only half real, since it was only in the realm of the imagination, in the immateria, an amalgamation of the physical nature of charlatan Senate and the metaphysical nature of Promethea. Anna died in childbirth. Okay, so the rest of these we don't really need to go into, and you guys kind of get the idea of the comic. Now, I want to share with you my takes on some of these important aspects. So, the overall theology. What is the overall theology and understanding of God? Let me put this, let me find this real quick. Okay, so I have all these notes. Okay, here's the overall theology that I got. So the overall theology of the comic book Promethea is really a multifaceted one that draws on a variety of religious and literary sources and philosophical. So the series incorporates elements of Western mysticism, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, as well as influences from Eastern religions and spiritual traditions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism, and Egyptian mythology. The series also draws on ideas of psychology and particularly Jungian archetypes and contemporary science. One of the central themes of the series is the concept of the imagination as a fundamental aspect of the universe and consciousness. The series presents the idea that the imagination is not just a human faculty, but it is a fundamental aspect of the universe. The series also explores the idea that the imagination is a realm of its own called, again, the immateria, or the realm of imagination, and how it is connected to the material world. This series also sort of explores that the universe is not just a physical reality, but also a spiritual reality. And this gets into these concepts of God that I'm going to get into. That it's also a spiritual reality, and that the spiritual and the physical are interconnected. Again, the materia and the immateria. The series explores the idea that spiritual growth is not just a personal journey, but it's also a collective journey. And that by assessing the collective imagination, one can gain deeper understanding of the universe, i.e. God, i.e. ultimate reality, all this different stuff. Another central theme is the idea of magic, and that magic's not just a human faculty, but also a fundamental aspect of the universe and consciousness. The series presents magic as natural and integral for personal and collective transformation. So let me get then back to how magic is portrayed, and then we'll get into tarot and the Sephiroth and stuff like that. So, in this series, so magic is portrayed basically as a powerful and transformative force that shapes both the world and human experience itself. And so it talks about how magic is not just the human faculty, but like I said, fundamental to the universe. The series presents magic as a way to access different realms and different levels of consciousness as a means of understanding the universe and one's place in it. It presents magic, as I said, as sort of natural and indicative of the universe, a tool for personal and collective transformation. Again, you see that alchemical understanding. So the androgynous, again, Bill Wolkoff, the male who's female, who then has a male lover. You see all these different things being laid out. Again, the dissolution of boundaries, right? This is a central aspect of not only magic, but psychedelics, but this paradigm itself. And so magic is then an essential tool for achieving personal goals. Okay, so if you have goals and you want to achieve them in the world, then you probably should use magic. It also explores the idea that magic is essential for your own spiritual growth. It portrays magic, again, as individual and a collective practice. And so magic is a form of wisdom and knowledge rather than just supernatural powers. And so that's where I said he basically builds upon the Aleister Crowleyan understanding of magic as a science. It's more science than science, because science only deals with materia, where magic deals with materia and the immateria. And so how does he then utilize aspects of magic? Well, first, let's talk about the imagination. How is the imagination fully understood? You probably already picked up on my stuff, but here's some bullet points I got. It's a powerful transformative force, just like magic itself. The imagination is a fundamental aspect of the universe. And so the imagination allows you access to different realms, different places that entities exist, which we wouldn't deny. And so the imagination is not just a human faculty, but it's a universal faculty, right? So there's only one imagination. We all as people have access to the singular imagination in Alan Moore's understanding. So the series portrays the imagination not just a tool of self-expression, but a tool of self-discovery and spiritual growth. If you want to grow spiritually, you do that through the imagination. You move through the imagination. So the main character, Sophie, becomes Promethea, the embodiment of imagination, and her journey throughout the series is to understand her role and powers as the embodiment of imagination. That's why I said that really Promethea, the female Prometheus, is that Promethea is the fire of the metaphysical understanding of the imagination. That's what he's trying to show you. Sophie, wisdom, Bangian fantasy, is moving through these magical metaphysical worlds to show you that the way you engage in magic, understanding the wisdom, is through the imagination. Okay? And so there's a whole series on understanding the tarot. And so in the series, the tarot is portrayed as, again, a way to understand the universe and oneself. And so the series makes extensive use of tarot imagery and symbolism, and that each issue, in a way, is named after a card of the tarot. The tarot is presented as a way to access the realms of the imagination and the collective universal levels of consciousness. The series portrays tarot as a system of archetypes and symbols that allow the user to understand and navigate different aspects of reality. Each card is presented as a representation of a specific aspect of reality and the universe. And by understanding the cards, the user can gain deeper understanding of what that card represents. So the card, again, you see the symbol of the tarot, you dive deeper into the immateria of the symbol itself. The series also explores the idea that the tarot is not just a physical deck of cards, but also an expression of the collective imagination, a tool to access the immateria and the realms of the imagination. Okay. Now, what about God? How is God understood within this comic? Here's what I got. So the way God is understood, it's portrayed in a variety of different ways. God is non-dual. God is non-personal. God is all-encompassing. God is the tree of life. God is men themselves, humanity or women. Again, there's a female feminist bent, but people are gods. And then the universe itself is a God. You see how God is multiple things. It's not just one thing. It's you, it's the tree of life, it's the universe. God is ever changing and evolving, right? So again, we would say, well, no, God, to be God by definition, God would have to be omniscient, immortal, and omnipotent. And therefore, to be all those things, to be eternal, God would be unchanging. But Moore's God is continually creating and evolving. It's a God that isn't static. If you want, it's a Heraclitean God. Again, a God that's the river that you never step in twice. God in Moore's worldview is something that's always changing. It's never the same. So you see these sort of evolutionary understandings of God and God playing itself out through us, almost like a Hegelian understanding of again, the sort of phenomenological self, if you will. So, God is also an aspect of the human imagination. I mean, there's clearly divine associations with the imagination in this comic. So he's making arguments that in a way, God is the imagination. God is the universe. God, all these different things. And that Christianity is the force that turned gold, the paganism, the old mystery religions into lead. And so the alchemist having to turn lead into gold, right? This is Moore's play on the language here. He's saying that we had to turn the alchemist had to turn lead back into gold because of what the Christians did. And so you can see then a sort of historical timeline here. There was gold in the ancient world, the mystery religions, the magic, the paganism. Christianity comes in with its understanding, with its formation, with its doctrines, with its tradition, and therefore the world, reality, existence becomes lead. And so it takes then the mystery religions, the Renaissance magic, alchemy of the 16th century to then revivify this process of turning the Christian world back into the pagan magical world of gold. Okay, this is an essential part of this sort of timeline that he's playing out. And so, like I said, God is not an unchanging being. It's not static. It's dynamic. It's ever changing. And it portrays the human imagination as a reflection of divine imagination. So your personal imagination's participating in sort of the cosmic universal imagination of God. And so then again, the whole basis then as Sophie Bangs moves into the immaterial to rescue Barbara, she's moving from one Sephiroth to another. And so we see that Keter is representing so let me go here. So if we go here, so here's some of here's the tree of life. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kabbalah. So this is the tree of life, and this is, again, where Sophie Bangs, Promethea, moving into the immateria, is moving through each of these different Sephiroths, okay? So Keter is the crown. It's the top one. It's the crown Sephiroths, or, again, this has been sort of appropriated also into Kundalini understandings of the energy centers of the body, again, talking about... the sex with Jim Faust and all this different stuff. So Keter is the highest Sephirah. It's situated about the intellectual triad and is designated as superconscious. Keter is infinite source, a state of being, a field of possibility. It's the ultimate unseen reality, the color gold. And so for more, again, Keter is representing the crown of God in the highest level of consciousness, and it represents pure divine will within the comic. The next one is Chokmah, representing wisdom and understanding. And for more, it represents the potential of creation. And again, this is consistent with even magical understanding. So Chokmah is wisdom, the seed of an idea, insight, inspiration, intuition, incarnate awareness. It's the color blue and black and represents the emergence of something from nothing. So you see how, again, Moore is laying out his entire magical worldview through this comic. It is, again, if you don't have eyes to see, you may not even pick up on it. But if me, knowing what he's talking about, and so I shout out to Austin for having me read this. It is dense with meaning. Now, meaning that I am opposition to, but meaning that I used to be in favor of. I mean, this thing has everything. Sexual promiscuity, female empowerment, homosexuality, psychedelic drugs, ritual magic, tarot, Kabbalah, Hermetic understandings. All of this stuff is within this comic. So also the Binah, I wrote down for more. Again, it's representing the ability to bring things into form. It represents the feminine aspect of God. And so here, if we look here, the Binah is fleshing out an idea, formulating the story, fashioning the structure. The color's dark red and represents something congealing. Okay. Then I wrote down for the Binah is representing the understanding of the ability to bring... Oh, no, I just did that. The Chesed is representing loving kindness. It represents the idea of God as a loving father. And so if we go here, the Chesed is unbounded love, expanding ideas, enlarging the circle, empathic concern, the color blue or flow of water. Okay, so that's how I portrayed it as it represents sort of the idea of God the Father. Then you have Gevura representing strength and judgment. It represents the idea as God as a punishing father. And so that's the next one. Gevura is strength of boundaries, setting limits, saying no, seeking focus, color red or definition. So you can see why more would represent this as the sort of... a forceful father-like figure. Again, I put down a punishing father. The Tiferet is representing the balance and harmony. It represents the idea of God. Here, let me go. The Tiferet is here. So the Tiferet is representing balance and harmony. It represents the idea as God as a reconcilier, right? It's a reconcilier of sort of opposites. It balances itself out. There's pure harmony. Here we see it's harmonizing and holding opposing energies, having compassion, color yellow, radiates light. Then I have the Netzach, representing victory and endurance. It represents the idea of God as a warrior. Here we go to Netzach. Netzach is victory, overcoming obstacles, orchestrating intention. It's the color purple for power. More than depicts Hod, representing glory and splendor. It represents the idea of God as monarch. Here we see Hod is surrender, acknowledge what is, accepting and giving way. Color orange for restoration and hope. So I thought that was a little interesting because it didn't seem like it totally matched up. But Yesod representing the foundation and connection. It represents the idea of God as a bridge between the material and the spiritual world. And so in the comic, you see Yesod, it's like written on a doorway in Hebrew, sort of Englishized Hebrew. So it looks like Hebrew, but it's clearly also English, so you can read it. And and she says, oh, Yesod is the foundation. It's what allows you to move in the sort of immaterial realm. And so again, we see Yesod is foundation. That's exactly what Moore writes in the comic, telling or twisting your truth, testing authenticity, the color green for growing and renewal. And then Malkuth, representing the material world, it represents the idea of God as the creator of the physical universe. And so here we see Malkuth is sovereignty, the final, lowest Sephirah. of the culmination or the flow from Keter through the Sephirot from possible to actual. Malkuth is what manifests or is actually expressed, and it's the color brown for the source or grounding. And so again, that's sort of how all these Sephiroths are played out in this particular comic. Yeah, what have I not hit? I've kind of gone over the imagination, magic, feminism, the Tree of Life, really all this different stuff. I think it's time to start to get into Moore's actual spiritual ideas. Now, I wanted to highlight Prometheus. You guys can look up who Prometheus is to learn more about the mythological figure and then why Moore would feminize Prometheus as Promethea. Again, she is the light. She's bringing the light of the understanding of the imagination and how it relates to magical, spiritual, metaphysical reality. That's what he's trying to show. And so, as I said, there was one instance, they get sort of jailed in or imprisoned by Asmodeus. And who is Asmodeus? Well, he is the prince of demons in hell. In the Judeo-Islamic lore, he is the king of both daemons and demons. Asmodeus is both known as the deuterocanonical book of Tobit, in which he is the primary antagonist of the Ars Goetia. And so, again, in the comic, Asmodeus is the leader of the Goetia. Well, what is the Goetia? Again, Goetia is the practice in which involves invoking, calling angels and demons. The word came from the 17th century grimoire, The Lesser Key of Solomon. Now, I did a whole stream, another sponsored stream on demonic magic, of which I specifically talk about the Lesser Key of Solomon. And again, what is it called? The Ars Goetia, Ars Theology Goetia. It has to do with this ability to summon deities, call entities. And that's exactly why then Asmodeus, consistent, is in fact head of the Goetia, which is head of this ability to call all these entities. You see how it all sort of maps out. And so I wanted to also highlight that for orthodoxy, we do believe that these logismi, as a term used to describe assaultive and tempting thoughts, that you can essentially become possessed through the imagination. And that is again, the central aspect of this comic, is that the way that the protagonist here, Sophie Bangs, becomes Promethea, the way that all of the female, and of course the gay dude, Bill, how they all become Promethea is by writing something, drawing something. And it's about through the imagination. So you give access to the imagination and then it comes through. And so I wrote something about the imagination here. Let me pull that up. In Eastern Orthodoxy, the imagination is considered to be a powerful tool that can be used positively or negatively. And so it can be used positively to help envision and meditate on spiritual concepts and ideas, or it can entertain and dwell in sinful thoughts and desires. The imagination can also be used to visualize oneself in a state of union with God, which is considered to be a desirable goal in Eastern Orthodox spirituality. Again, the Jesus prayer, hesychism, all these different things. Or it can be used in the opposite, which is exactly the point of the comic. You see, it's showing that this is a real reality, that the imagination really does open you up to a non-local realm of which you can contact real entities. It's not a joke. And so, however, if the imagination is not controlled and directed towards God, it can lead to spiritual possession, which is believed to occur when an individual allows evil spirits to enter and take control of their mind and soul, which is exactly what Promethea does in the various women and gay man Bill who are Promethea. It is believed that this can happen through engaging in sinful thoughts and actions and through dabbling in occult practices. Oh, really? To avoid spiritual possession, Eastern Orthodox Christians are encouraged to keep their minds focused on God and to resist evil thoughts and temptations through prayer, repentance, and the sacrament of confession. Okay. So, again, continuing on here, here's some stuff, like I said, on the Sephiroth. Here's some stuff on the tarot. If you guys, here, I can share these links with you guys real quick. If anybody wants to learn more about this stuff, you can right here. Let me share these links with you. Sorry guys, I've been hammering it for the last few minutes. If you could, please smash that like. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you'd like to support this stream, please send in a super chat. I'll get to all those here in just a few. Now we're going to get into really what I think is the most interesting part of this stream, which is hearing Alan Moore talk about his own ideas. So here is I probably should have just read this overview, but oh well. So if you guys want this overview, I think I took way too long describing the whole thing. I apologize. Austin. I ramble, dude. I apologize, Austin. I probably should have summarized this whole thing earlier, but now we're going to get into, again, Alan Moore. Now, this is really interesting stuff that I think is the most interesting part of this is to see what the author really thinks, because as I said, he admits that this comic is basically him putting his entire magical practice, theology, and worldview into a work of art, which itself is a sigil. He's making it come alive, taking it from the immateria, the imagination, and making it three-dimensional in the comic book itself. So here, I want you to first, we're going to get an idea of what his spirituality is. So here is a video on paganism, magic, Alan Moore, and Glycon. Again, the god that he worships.
21st century Britain is home to variety.
Let me skip forward.
Writer and magician from Northampton. He's a stranger to hairdressers and worships his very own god in his very own way, blurring the lines between religious belief, magic, and the power of the creative imagination. If you film him from strange angles, you can make him look very sinister. But he isn't really.
Hello, mate. Could I have a cup of tea, please? Black tea.
Alan's familiar on his journey of faith and worship is an ancient Roman glove puppet snake called Glycon.
Well, actually, I just thought he looked gorgeous. He looked so smug. And he'd got these lidded eyes and this superior expression, which I identified with in a certain way.
Yeah.
And also, like I say, it's just the absurdity of this limbless serpentine body and this Paris Hilton head on top of it. It's irresistible. He's certainly the coolest, most rock and roll looking god that I have ever seen. I just fell in love at first sight.
You've not chosen to worship Paris Hilton, though, by extension?
No, I've certainly not.
No.
It's sort of, there are limits, even to somebody who's worshipping a hairy snake, I'm not going to go mad here.
What's in it for you, though, following Glycon?
I believe that every single individual human being should probably make their own peace with the universe. We're all of us different emotionally, we're all different physically, intellectually. It would be really odd if we were all the same spiritually. So, that's why I have a problem with religion, per se, because religion, the very word, it comes from the same root word as ligature and ligament, and it means to be bound together in one belief, which I find a bit creepy and a bit unnatural.
How did you first go about worshipping Glycon, and what form does the worship take?
Well, when I started to become interested in magic, I understood that everything that people talk about with regard to magic is all absolutely true, as long as you understand that it is happening inside people's minds. And
so you can begin to understand, again, the immateria, the role of the imagination regarding the comic, and how this is the way in which people are accessed to these realms and to these entities, both fictional and historical.
It struck me that must be what magic is. It must be like treating the space that we perceive inside our minds as a kind of territory. And I thought that working on that hypothesis, you could explore that territory.
You can't have that conversation with a Christian fundamentalist.
Religious fundamentalism, it's a bit of a misnomer, because if you actually look back at the foundations of Christianity, you find that the thinking is a lot more flexible.
Yeah.
The kind of what we call fundamentalism these days is basically entirely based upon 1930s tent show revivalism.
Right.
It goes back no further than about 80 years. And yet it's a very frightening and dangerous mindset because, I mean, as far as I understand it, at the moment, there are genuine worries that, certainly in America, that this could actually negate science, it could drag us back into a new dark ages.
Yeah, and it informs policy.
Absolutely. Well, I mean,
again, it's funny that the Dark Ages are religious. Again, the Dark Ages are just a term to represent the medieval period. He just talked about how fundamentalism is really just a 20th century phenomenon, so we see a contradiction there. But I also wanted to highlight in his sort of abstract understanding of the God as universe. It's not a real person. It's not a thing that you personally interact with. It's the abstraction. It's the imagination. It's the sort of characteristics that we have because we ourselves are God, right?
You've got sort of self-confessed fundamentalists at the top seats of government. That surely kind of threatens the separation of church and state, you'd think.
What would be the policies of a nation marching under the flag of Glycon?
But the name apparently it means sweetie.
Oh, really?
It's really nice. Yeah, he's just called Sweetie. I suppose that sweetness and good hair would be the main qualities that I'd look for, and enlightenment.
And they're all qualities which you embody.
Absolutely, and the smugness as well. I'd like to see a bit more of that around.
Okay, and so this is, as I showed earlier, this is his god, Glycon. So he had a large and influential cult within the Roman Empire in the 2nd century, and with contemporary satirist Lucian providing the primary literary reference of the deity. Lucian claimed Glycon was created in the mid-2nd century, by the Greek prophet Alexander of Abotikios. Lucian was ill-disposed toward the cult, calling Alexander a false prophet and accusing the whole enterprise of being a hoax. Glycon himself was supposedly a hand puppet. Oh, let me... So what I found really interesting, though, is Marcus Aurelius. So coming down here, the spread and influence. By 160, the worship of Glycon had undoubtedly spread beyond the Aegean. The Aegean, again, that space right around Greece and Turkey. Its inscription, or between Greece and Rome, actually. Its inscription from Antioch of the date records a slogan, Glycon, protect us from the plague cloud. That is consistent with the description we have from Lucian. Also in that year, the governor of Asia, Plumbius Mummius Caecina Rutilianus, declared himself the protector of Glycon's oracle. The governor later married Alexander's daughter, again the prophet of Glycon. According to Lucian, another Roman governor of Cappadocia was led by Glycon's oracle to his death in Armenia. And even the emperor himself was not immune to the cult, as Marcus Aurelius, again, the famous Stoic, right, the philosopher king, sought prophecies from Alexander and his snake god. Isn't that funny? Wow. Anyways, okay, now let's move on to more aspects of, again, here's Alan Moore describing what is magic. What is magic?
Alan Moore. I am a writer and magician, and all of my life thus far, I've lived in Northampton. Northampton is a town that is at the economic, geographic, and historic dead centre of England, and to a degree, this town is my territory. At the age of 40 in 1993, I decided that I had a fairly stark choice in front of me. I could have a midlife crisis, which was fashionable amongst a number of my 40-year-old friends, or I could perhaps attempt something more interesting and go absolutely stark, slobbering mad and declare myself to be a magician. I felt that the latter option would probably have more entertainment value, both for myself and for those around me, than simply wandering around asking what it was all about and where life was going. Magic has pretty much dominated my work and life since then. It has, more than anything, opened up a different kind of language, a different way of reading and understanding the world around me. Magic, I've come to realise, is not an escape into some fabulous nether dimension, some marvellous mystical dream world populated with extraordinary creatures. Yes, there are extraordinary creatures and strange dream landscapes that are very much a part of magic, but magic, more than this to me, is a new way of seeing our own world. It's a new language, a new set of eyes, a new way of reading the signs and symbols and messages that surround us every day. Part of that, for me, has been the task of, as a shaman, as a magician, of mapping my territory, trying to understand the streets that I walk down every day, trying to understand the mundane and perfectly ordinary town in which I live.
So again, you see how this is totally consistent with what I just laid out with, again, the comic Promethea. This is the fulfillment of this entire worldview, that it's the imagination. The imagination has these magical landscapes. You can contact these wild entities. This is exactly what Sophie Bangs does as Promethea.
From a new perspective, on a new level. For the magician, the act of walking down the street to the shops to buy 20 silk cut is a profound magical act. Part of this is understanding that every moment of our lives we are already living in a magical territory. To some degree, we live within our consciousness. We do not actually see the world. What we see is our perception of the world. That is all we can ever see. Thus, our perceptions, our consciousness, is, in some senses, a truer reality than the hardcore reality of bricks and mortar that surrounds us. For the magician, the act of walking down a street is less to do with the solid paving slabs beneath his or her feet, more to do with the web of association, of memory, of fiction that surrounds the place through which the magician passes.
See, why memory and fiction? Because memory is in the immaterial. If we're going to use the language of Promethea, it's in the imaginal. So it breaks down the history. It's a non-temporal realm, right? This is why for him Christ is a symbol and all this different stuff. It's an atemporal realm. And so that's why then fiction and all this different stuff.
Any street that you walk down will have layers of association and memory connected with it. It will have memories of when your mother perhaps pushed you down that street in your pushchair when you were 18 months old. You'll perhaps remember playing with your friends there when you were 10, walking a girlfriend home down that street when you were 17. There will be all of these personal layers of recollection and history. On top of that, there will be the history of the place itself. That information that you've managed to cull from history books, town records, famous people that are associated with this site. Murders, ghosts. There will also be a layer of rumour, lie, legend, prejudice. A certain neighbourhood is associated with a certain class of people, usually the wrong class of people. This may be justified, it may not be, but it has a certain reality in that idea will be colouring the thoughts of anybody who passes through that location. So to some degree, as the self-proclaimed, self-styled shaman of Northampton, I've felt that it was my duty to try to understand the landscape around me in a new way, to map it, to impose my own map of what were important concepts, important places, important to me, to impose that map upon the landscape rather than simply follow the maps that have already been given us. Civic maps, political maps. To some degree, in this cusp of the century, we are at a unique standpoint in our history. Something is happening to our maps and to our sense of geography, partly through increases in our skills and abilities with communication, partly through the sudden dominating presence of the internet. Our sense of geography is almost evaporating. Geographical distances, which a couple of centuries ago would have ruled our lives.
Great point. Kingdom Kid says, my own, mine, my. Who do you know you sound like? It sounds like Lucifer. Again, and I didn't mention this because there was so much information I wanted to convey in regards to Promethea, but Prometheus is a Luciferian archetype. Lucifer is a sort of light bringer. It's a false light. It's a dark light. It's the light of magic. It's the light of self-destruction. It's the light of death. It's a false light. It's a black light. You know, think of Hocus Pocus and they light the black candle. What is it? It's a black light. It's not a real light. The real light is Christ. The real light revolves humility, submission, mercy, compassion. That's not what this is about. This is about power. This is about my will being done. That's why I said this is about the fulfillment of the sort of Crowleyan concept. You know, for him, and this is part of the Promethea comic, is that magic's purpose is to map physical and metaphysical existence. That's exactly what he's talking about right now as the role of magic.
Possibilities of our lives with an iron hand now seem to mean far less. We can talk to somebody in Japan in a couple of moments. We could be in Japan probably within 12 hours. This is quite staggering when you consider it in the light of, say, our grandparents, who, in the case of my grandparents, probably never went beyond 5 miles of the place of their birth throughout their entire lives. Consequently, our maps are evaporating, if you like. They no longer mean the same thing that they did. Distances these days are electronic distances rather than distances measured in how fast a horse can travel or how fast a man can walk. Consequently, with the maps tending to boil away, become less meaningful, it seems that we have an opportunity. We can, to some degree, reclaim our circumstances, the landscapes around us.
Because for him, everything is a social construction. Again, as he lays out in Promethea, gender, sex, the roles of women and men, these are all social constructions of which, again, he's talking about we can remap. Now, we believe in the Logos. We believe in Christ. And Christianity offers us the true map of reality. If you want to really navigate the world itself in existence, that's what the Logos is. God provides us that through Christ. And so by following Christ, again, he is like a maze through a cornfield. We don't have to come up and create our own paths, as he's arguing, or the sort of magical paradigm he's a part of. We follow Christ. It's through humility. It's through submission. It's through the enacting of these uncreated energies that we personify towards other people. That's how we that's how we move through this map of reality, if you will. Now, again, this goes on. I don't know if I'll play a little bit of this, but it goes into language, writing, and magic. I'm going to speed this up just because it takes so long for him to say anything. But I want to get into some of these other things. Again, this is art and magic. This is him talking about three-dimensional characters. And then I want you to hear this by Grant Morrison talking about sigil magic and how he actually uses this as his comics, which, again, I'm arguing that that's essentially what Promethea is as a comic book. So here.
Aspects of my researches into magic and the occult has been the discovery that actually magic has quite a lot in common with fiction and with fantasy. We almost get to the notion that the two are pretty well interchangeable. I think that Aleister Crowley even mentioned that the language of magic is more about language than it is about magic. The idea of a grimoire, a dark book of spells. Grimoire is simply another way of spelling grammar. According to Crowley, to cast a spell is simply to spell. When we think of the fact that most of the magic gods that various cultures have created or worshipped in the past, characters like Hermes, Mercury, Thoth, these are not only the gods of magic, they are also the scribe gods. They are the gods of writing. To some degree, the reason that I involved myself with magic was partly because, as a writer, I was feeling that something to do with the territory of writing itself, the way that anybody who's been writing for a given length of time will probably have anecdotes to tell you, strange little coincidences, things that they wrote and then something very similar happened to them, perhaps a day, perhaps a month, perhaps 10 years later. That there are these odd little incidents that tend to build up, and that you tend to shove in a filing drawer just marked weird stuff.
And because you have nowhere else to put them. You know, there is no other compartment within your life, no other context into which you can fit these strange little anomalous events, these little synchronicities. And eventually, as with myself, you might reach a point where you perhaps decide that the stuff in the drawer marked weird stuff is in fact the only important stuff. And that if you wish to progress as a writer beyond mere technique, then you might be advised to start looking at some of those events. This leads to a consideration of the relationship between fiction and reality. I started to come to the conclusion that fiction has an immaterial reality that is exactly equivalent to material reality. It is no less or more real, it is simply different. For example, we have a three-dimensional solid material chair, such as the one that I'm sitting in. This is real in material terms. Then we have the idea of a chair. The idea of a chair is perhaps more important than any single individual chair, and yet the idea of a chair exists nowhere in the physical universe. It cannot be measured in a laboratory. It is completely outside the realm of science, as are all of our thoughts, all of our internal events. To some degree, the things that happen in our heads are the only things that we can ever know with any certainty. And yet, these are precisely the things that science is, by its very nature, completely incapable of dealing with. Science, I think, would very often rather...
Yeah, that's a great point. Shout out to everybody who's highlighting Amptown, J.C. Owens, John B. Again, God bless you, Kingdom Kin. Wonderful to hear that the catechism's going well. But exactly, like it's the spirit that's possessing him. It's this imaginal force that is actually working through him in his work and his art and all this different stuff. So, you know, it's kind of, again, we've heard enough, basically. I want to move on here to, again, we'll watch this one, and then we'll skip the three-dimensional character crap, and we'll just get to Grant Morrison, and then we'll get into the super chats. Here we go. This is Alan Moore on art and magic. Notice magic is spelt the Thelemic way with a K. Aleister Crowley, do what thou wills. And look, this is what I love about, like, look at these comics, these comments. Love this, spot on. Where are they? Some of these are like creative magical act, language is magic, magic is real. We've just seen Alan being filmed materializing. Where some of these, I may have been on other videos, but literally people just looking at these comments, it's like, I felt bad. I mean, how many of these people like are practicing? Look, this one, Hail Glycon, all be dissolved by his snake sack. I think it was a different video that I actually found, but it was sad, like looking at all the comments of all these different people who, believe, practicing magic, talking about how it's real, talking about all this different stuff. So anyways, let's watch this, and then we'll get into Grant Morrison, and then we'll dive into some of these super chats. Guys, if you're still here, please smash that like. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Here we go.
The words are almost interchangeable, magic and art. That we have the concept of high magic, which is magic where you don't know what you're doing, essentially. You're just doing whatever comes into your mind on the assumption that this is an instruction from the forces of the universe. It's completely spontaneous. It's not got any of the censorship of the rational conscious mind involved in it at all. The same could be said of great works of art, that you don't know why you're doing them, you're not sure how you're doing them, or what purpose there is. It's just something where you feel a compulsion that is bigger than you.
And again, what did we talk about with this orthodox understanding of the imagination and how we have to be very conscious of the thoughts that come into our minds, right? We can be deliberate with the imagination and think about Christ, think about positive things, think about our future. You can be deliberate with the imagination, or you can be receptive with the imagination, which orthodoxy would be in opposition to. Because, again, the logismi, the demons, the devil, they can assault. The spiritual war is taking place in your mind. It's all in your mind. And so being very careful of what you're engaging with. Now, his whole artistic process is basically being a receptacle for whatever comes into his imagination. And many artists are, and I'm not saying all artists who do this are being tempted by demons or all this stuff, but look at what he's creating. I think it's really interesting. And I think this is exactly what's going on. It is a sort of possession, and that is why it's a larger entity. It's something larger than him who's telling him what to write or giving him, quote unquote, inspiration for his work.
It's bigger than yourself. So, yes, I'd say that if you want to understand magic, try thinking about art. If you want to understand art, try thinking about magic. In fact, I believe that both fields would be immensely enriched if they were only to take on the values of the other camp. That we would have magic that, if it was all seen as being a form of art, where it might actually produce wonderful works of art. It might actually produce works like those of Austin Spare, or any of the other great Rosalind Norton, people, great artists who've been connected with the occult over the years. That would give a purpose that modern magic is almost completely lacking. At the same time, if contemporary artists were to be drawing upon the ideas that are in magic, then we wouldn't be getting all of this empty, vacuous, conceptual shit that art seems to be frozen in at the moment, where, yes, conceptual art, but they're not even real concepts. They're concepts in the advertising sense. I blame Charles Saatchi for a lot of this. But if you were to have that exchange of blood between art and magic, I think that both art and magic would be enriched immeasurably. They would both have a human purpose and would relate to the world in which we are actually all existing.
Okay, so Prego Joker, I'll address some of that real quick, says, aren't they all talking about supernatural powers? God and Jesus have these powers, but don't demons have similar powers? These people pray to these demons as the demons are more giving of these. No, it's a different understanding of power. Again, in Orthodoxy, we do not have a dialectic or a dualistic understanding that somehow evil has a real substance. It's the absence of, actually. And so, no, they do not have the same powers or the same supernatural powers. It's a sort of privation of God. It's the privation of what we would call the uncreated energy. So love, mercy, compassion, truth, logic, reason. Again, it would take a whole nother stream getting into, and maybe I'll do that in another stream, but it's not the same thing. It's a totally different paradigm of how we engage with God. That's why I said for his worldview, everything's non-dual, dissolution of boundaries. The God is non-personal, all-encompassing. The God is the tree of life. It's magic. It's humanity. It's the universe. God is ever-changing. This is not the God that I worship. And so supernatural powers, it's not that demons bestow powers to us. Absolutely not. Demons are trying to take away our power because we're made in the image, and we have an ability that, in fact, demons do not. That's why the whole spiritual warfare is about our souls. We are unique. God, and our paradigm as Christians, became a man. So if you are a man or a woman, you are much closer to the image of God than anything else. Whereas angels and demons do not have the same abilities that we do. That's why God, as Jesus Christ, is a full man sitting onto the right hand of the Father. It is a privileged ontology to be man, to be human. And so our worldview, again, there would be a lot to unpack here if you're not familiar with orthodoxy, but maybe I'll do that in the next stream. Maybe I'll do that Friday, is talking about Orthodox theology versus the New Age and magic, and unpack a lot of this stuff just so we can talk more about it. Because, again, if you're not familiar with orthodoxy, Prego Joker, I could see why you would say that. I'm not here to assault you in any way or any of your assumptions, because that is fine and that makes sense. But they certainly aren't bestowing the same type of powers that God or Christ would, because we do believe in right or wrong, and we believe that demons are, again, because they send outside time, they already know the end of history, that they're going to lose. And so the game is to get us to also take in that vacuous existence where we also are going to lose. We're also going to die through our sin, by the absence of these uncreated energies, by the absence of compassion, by the absence of humility, by the absence of truth, by the absence of logic and reason and all these different things. So totally different paradigm. And unfortunately, again, I feel like this stream's already been packed full of information trying to talk about Promethea. I just don't have enough time to lay out then Orthodox theology and how it relates to all this stuff. But I think that would be probably a really good stream for Friday night, so I'll do that then. But here's the last video that I want to highlight. And this is Grant Morrison, again, also a comic book writer. Which comics did Grant Morrison write? Let me look here. Grant Morrison comic book. Here we go. Grant Morrison is a comic book writer, screenwriter, producer, nonlinear narratives, humanist philosophy, and countercultural leanings. Morris has written extensively on the American comic book publisher DC Comics, penning lengthy runs with Animal Man, Doom Patrol, JLA, Action Comics, The Green Lantern, as well as graphic novels like Akram Aslam, Wonder Woman, Earth One, the miniseries Seven Soldiers, The Multiversity, the miniseries, okay, yada, 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 yada. And so, yeah. So anyways, this is who we're getting ready to listen to right now. And you're going to hear him describe, again, the sigil magic and how this relates to his own works. And so that's exactly, again, what I wanted to finish with. Promethea, as a comic book written by Alan Moore, is absolutely utilizing these same understandings of the sort of metaphysics of reality. Now, how does sigil magic work? Because, again, I believe the Logos is the Word of God. God did speak the world into existence. Language and the ability to participate in language is a higher faculty, which the animals can't participate in because, again, we are made in the image of God. However, magic is the sort of manipulation. It's the inversion of the Word. It's utilizing the Word to sort of manipulate this metaphysical force, language itself, semiotics, symbols, for the manifestation of your own will, which again is going to be a deprivation of God's image in you. You're going to become more sinful, more depressed. You're going to lose the joy of Christ, the true word. So to follow the real word, the Logos, is an act of submission. It takes discipline, humility, all these different things, the pursuit of logic, truth, all this different stuff where you're not manifesting your own will, where you can sort of hijack this structure of reality, the utilization of language for the manifestation of your own will. And that's exactly what he's going to highlight.
Leading on from these ridiculous, where do you go from it? I was told this stuff when I come out. I'm just this little kid from Govan in Glasgow, which is a real dodgy area. And I didn't go to university. I left school at 18. But suddenly, I found out that if you do these things that you're told by Aleister Crowley, by Wilson, by all these people we read and all these people we've been consuming, but we don't do it, if you actually do what they say, things happen. Things occur exactly as it's described, and we can all do it. So I decided to put this to use in the comic book that I was doing, this thing called The Invisibles. And the idea was to kind of get all this down on paper and somehow look at it, not to accept it as reality, to accept it as purely this is part of human experience. It's a part of human experience that has been described to us for thousands and thousands of years, but for the last 200 has been hidden and made occult for some reason that I don't understand. It seems to have to do with the Industrial Revolution and corporate culture. So these things happen. Magic works. And when I started doing the comic, I found that you could actually make magic happen by writing things and changing the operating system of the universe. It works, and I'm here to tell you to try it when you go home tonight, because it fucking works. And what happens if we all do it? Everyone in this room decides to take control of reality. I'm talking about reality.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Again, you can see this is at the Disinfo conference, and you can already see the sort of satanic imagery just of the podium itself. But again, this is where my own experience, right? Part of my journey to Orthodox Christianity, and Christianity generally speaking, as a religious studies scholar, was actually practicing magic. And so he's getting ready to lay out what's called Sigil magic, taking things from the immateria, if you were, the imagination, desires, manifesting them two-dimensionally by writing them down, and then creating symbols, and then you can sort of manifest them three-dimensionally through sculptures, all this different stuff, and then you can charge them in certain ways. Well, I did this once. I actually wanted, I think for me, it was like I wanted an extra $1,000 or $2,000, I forget, by the end of the month, just to see what would happen. And I did exactly what he's getting ready to lay out. And so I just want to, we're using this video for didactic, pedagogical purposes. Do not do what he's talking about unless you're trying to invite darkness into your life, because as soon as you start manifesting your will, there's always an energetic exchange. Right? That's the thing. The energetic exchange with Christ is that if you follow him and submit, that energy actually divinizes you, makes you stronger, makes you better, makes you more like the incarnation of God. However, the energetic exchange of manifesting the things that you want weakens you. It's a privation of those divine energies. And yeah, you can get what you want, but there's always an exchange, and that exchange is spiritual and it is energetic.
I'm talking about quantum physics. I'm talking about taking control of things from the quantum level up, from the molecular level up, and it works. This magic works. So I'll tell you something you can do while I'm here. One of the best techniques and one of the easiest techniques to prove that this thing works is to practice sigil magic. The technique is simple. Have a desire tonight. Go home and do this. Don't listen to this shit. Don't listen to my bullshit and go home and think, yeah, we are the fucking counterculture. Do it! Do it, and we will change the world, right? Because I did.
But the world itself would just be the confluence of everybody's desires and everybody's wants and wills, and therefore they would conflate against each other, and it would just be chaos. But that's the point, right? Because the logos itself is the metaphysical structure of reality, and so we then unify ourselves with God's will to create. Again, that's what sacred geometry is: fractal mathematics, cymatics, correct order, ethics and morality, aesthetics. All of this stuff is based on archetypal structures rooted in a metaphysical reality called the logos. This idea that we're all going to manifest our wills and change reality for the better, that doesn't even make sense. Because there has to be a unifying, truthful will. There has to be a true structure to reality. And that if we truly want harmony and balance, again, go back to the freaking Kabbalah stuff here. If we want that, again, beauty, harmonizing and holding opposing energies, right? Then the harmonizing. If you want balance, if you want all this stuff, then you need to unify yourself with God's will.
I didn't trust those guys. I didn't trust Wilson. I didn't trust those people who told me we could do this stuff. And I'm here to tell you it works, and you can do it. We can all do it. Number one, first thing you do, write down a desire. Make it something easy that is likely to happen, something possible, rather than say, you know, I'm going to be king of the moon, which you may want to be, as we all do, but it's kind of hard to be king of the moon. You're going to have to get a rocket and go up there. So pick something easy. If you want to sigilize for a lottery win, make sure you buy a ticket, or else it won't work. So these are the conditions within the material universe that we live in. One of the things we're actually dealing with is some kind of operating system that can be hacked using words. And words seem to be the binding agent for this thing, whatever it is. So I wrote this comic book, and as I wrote it, it became true. Things I would make the characters do became true. The main character was, I gave him a bald head and a leather jacket because I thought people would like me when they read the comic. And bald heads were really uncool back in 1992. And it worked. I found that if I put the character through a situation where he was being tortured, where his lungs had burst and he was being held in captivity and subjected to all these awful things, 3 months later I'm in hospital, 2 burst lungs, dying of blood poisoning and facing exactly the same shamanic trial that I put my character through. So once I figured out that, I thought, well, the best thing to do is give this guy an easy time in the future. So as a result of this, I just split up with my girlfriend, and I said, okay, I want a new one. I want it to look exactly like this chick in the comic, because she's cool. You know? So I did a sigil. A month later, the girl turns up. Then another one, then another one, then another one, then another one. All aspects of this character, and I realised, oh fuck, this is insane. Because it works, and I've done something ridiculous, because now I'm dealing with all these women who look like the character, but I don't get on with, or I can't talk to, or I can't deal with. And I began to realise a little bit about how this stuff works. So beyond that, I decided I won't just use it to get laid, because it seems pretty pretty low grade kind of way of dealing with magic. but man, it works, believe me. And I thought, how much could you affect reality by writing a comic that mimicked reality but pushed it in weird directions? So around about 1997, I decided I would really seriously turn the thing into a super sigil. And it was based on the idea of, if you look at cave art, the first writing was done basically as art. And if someone wanted to make something happen, like if you were some like fucked up caveman in a cave somewhere moaning about your dinner, what do? You draw a bison on the wall, stick some spears in it, go out, and the bison dies filled with spears. And it's, hey man, we can make this happen. Slowly those things become letters, they become words, they become reduced to abstractions, complexes of meaning. And you can take that.
So again, cave art is not about a sigil manifestation. It's about a description and probably a describing as a form of language itself, a semiotic expression of what they themselves did. That's a total assumption to say that what they were doing is practicing sigil magic and hijacking what he calls the sort of operating system of reality. That is a logical leap. That is not a sort of logical follow based on that. There's multiple reasons why somebody could have created cave art or wrote themselves killing a bison or a deer or whatever it may be.
That basic idea, and as we've seen, people like Austin Osman Spare, the magician from the early part of the century, or Crowley, Osman Spare, both of which are his actual entities that are present within the Promethea comic book by Alan Moore. Again, tapping into the immaterial, the imagination, and again, essentially allowing these entities access into the materia through you. Or the chaos magicians from the 80s, who were a big inspiration on me. They used this stuff. And what you can do is this, like I say, try this at home. Write down a desire. Quite simple, say, it is my desire that my cat wins the Olympics. Take out all the vowels. Right? Write this down, for fuck's sake, and do it. Don't just listen, do it, right?
Don't do it.
The vowels, and you'll be left with a string of consonants. Take out the repeated consonants, and you'll be left with a string of consonants that have no repeats in it, whatever, X, Y,
And why is that? Because vowels are only phonetic. So again, a lot of old languages, i.e. Hebrew, for example, older forms of Greek, they didn't have vowels because vowels are just help us pronounce and enunciate words. Vowels have no meaning. That's why you can actually still read words. If you were to take a paper and you took out all the vowels out, many people could still read the words. Why? Because meaning is held in the consonants. Okay, and so that's what he's highlighting is you're creating a sigil based on the meaning structures themselves, the symbols themselves, which contain meaning. And so now you can manifest this desire, this intention in the materia, in the imagination, and make it physical.
A, D, whatever. Turn that thing into a little image. Take the D, draw a big D, then you've got a T, draw a T under it, and keep reducing it down until it looks magical. And there are no rules for this thing. Do it until it looks magical. At that point, you now have a sigil. The sigil will work. You can project desire into reality and change reality. It works.
Notice the YouTube channel is Universal Wicca, right? again, then look at the comments. My will and desire be done. Is there more video? There's anywhere. He's so right. It really does work. I made my tattoo this way and it came out awesome. You can charge a sigil with meditation. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. That's straight from Aleister Crowley. So you see how influential these ideas are, and again, how it leads people in the wrong space. That's why Promethea as a comic book itself is itself a sigil. It's itself a catalyst for the dissolution of boundaries, because as you read the comic, if you're not intentional, if you're not aware, if you're not, again, a Christian and have an understanding of all this stuff, you yourself are going to aid in the manifestation of it, because we'll talk about how you charge sigils here in a second.
Those must be the people who've done it. So please, write this down, go home and do it and check it, verify the results, because scientific procedure, I was reading this thing in New Scientist this week, and they said the difference between bad science and good science is that scientific procedure has 3 criteria.
So now you're seeing, again, him articulate magic as the full fulfillment of science. This is exactly Thelemic understandings. This is, again, much of the Renaissance, alchemy. This has to do with magic being a practice that is dealing with science, but also dealing with the immaterial, with the imaginal, with the supernatural, right? So he's articulating these same exact things that are expressed in Promethea by Alan Moore.
And the criteria are that you can verify results, you can talk to other people who've done the thing and make sure, that it works out. You can duplicate results, and also some other thing I've forgotten. But yeah, 2 things is fucking good, isn't it? 2 This is verifiable. People have been telling us about this for thousands of years. The Tibetans have been telling us about this. The Mesopotamians have been telling us about this. And why has it been made occult? Because Coca-Cola have got the secret. These people know what we're talking about here, because what you do is you create a sigil. Coca-Cola is a sigil. The McDonald's M is a sigil. These people are basically turning the world into themselves.
Now, I don't disagree with that. I actually do agree with that. And so these sigils are doing exactly that. That these corporations, these major corporations, these logos, they are sigils. They really are sigils. And so that's exactly, it's sort of tunneling in the world energy into it. And so you can charge these sigils by a few different ways. The book, The Secret, talked about putting, again, the sigil or the affirmation or the description, again, the secret to have you write out in words the concept. Okay, my highest desire, I want to have a brand new house. So then you'd get photos of the house and you'd put it, on your dream board and all this different stuff, that, acts of manifestation. The sigil is more powerful than all this stuff because it's trying to embed itself deeper into the psyche, right? The idea is that you're going to utilize your own sort of creative energies to manifest this thing. And so then the sigil is a sort of abstraction, that the word, the concepts, it's not so linear. It's a symbol. And so you can charge it, one, by looking at it all the time. You can charge it by getting other people to look at it, i.e. corporate logos. That's why, in fact, again, I think many of these things are, in fact, sigils. They are working on people because you can charge them. The more people who look at it, again, unconsciously, that's how you can break all this magic stuff. As long as you are aware, once you're aware of it, once you're conscious of it, you can break the shackles, right? It's like you can break from it. But if you're unconscious of it, again, you're sort of manipulated by it. You can charge it by you looking at it regularly. You can charge it by putting it in places where you're subconsciously looking at it, where you don't really recognize it, you don't really see it that much. You can charge it by getting other people to look at it. Or, as I've said before, you can charge it by looking at a sigil or some of this stuff during the point of orgasm. The idea here is that during an orgasm, the hemispheres, the corpus callosum, which connects the right and left hemisphere, that during a state of orgasm, it sort of connects both these hemispheres. And so there's sort of mythologies of women whispering in the ear of a man when he orgasms, because the idea is you can embed these sigils, these logos, these thoughts, these patterns deep in the collective unconscious. Remember how the immateria, the imagination, is this collective realm. Remember how I was articulating the role of the imagination in the comic book Promethea? That's exactly what they're talking about. This is exactly the basis of magic. And so that's another way, is that through sex, and this is where it gets into sex magic and how you can manipulate the energies of sexual activity and harness them, sublimate them for tantric purposes, for the manifestation of ideas and stuff like that. And so that's exactly what he's talking about. And so to wrap all this stuff up, my point is that the comic Promethea, Sophie Bangs, becoming Promethea, the homosexuality, the feminism, the transgenderism, the female empowerment through learning about magic, through sex, having a sort of Faustian pact with Jim Faustus and sleeping with him, learning about tarot, learning about Kabbalah, believing in these sort of hermetic ideas. This is a sigil to the highest degree. And so, again, for me looking at it, I feel like I can spot all this stuff. I can see it. I can sort of piece it all together and put my finger on it. But for the average person, they absolutely cannot. And if kids are reading like a comic like Promethea, Lord have mercy on them. Lord have mercy, because they have no idea what they're engaging in. Again, talking about, sex and penises and the dick being a magic wand and all this different stuff. If a child got a hold of this stuff, which is the point of, again, the comic books are so subtle, anime, right? They look so innocent, yet you can embed it with concepts, ideas, magical theories that are very, very dangerous, because kids are going to get these ideas. They may not even know where they got it from. And so Promethea as a comic book, as a graphic novel, is itself a catalyst for the presuppositions and the paradigm that it supports. Again, it was written in 1999. We are now in 2023. The British Museum bans the word mummy because it's offensive to Egyptian dead people. There's been a transgender canceling of Aretha Franklin's song "A Natural Woman." Because again, men are women too. This breakdown in boundaries, these breakdown in categories, this is chaos magic. We are in a chaotic magical realm right now. And therefore, you can create your own map, participating in the chaos, participating in the magic, or you can follow the map, the God, the light, the truth, and the life, which is Jesus Christ. And that is the logos. And now we can get into the metaphysics and the theology and these understandings of archetypes and mathematics and semiotics and fractals and sacred geometry and nature. All this stuff has a objective pattern to it. It's not chaos. It's not chaotic. But that, again, as scripture says, chaos is the privation of God. And so you look at what the world's becoming, it's God is being taken out of the world. The objective patterns of God, of the logos, are being taken out of the world. And that's why it's becoming more chaotic, and the dissolution, the boundaries are blending more and more and more until there is no distinction between anything. And that's why everybody's going to worship the Antichrist. The Antichrist that's going to be fully machine and fully man, unlike Christ being fully God and fully man. It's the full inversion. That's what all this stuff is. Men having periods, women having dicks, men having breasts. What is this? This is Baphomet. This is the androgyny. This is the dissolution, the amalgamation of opposites, of which, again, the Bill Walcott character within Promethea is in fact embodying that exact thing. That exact thing. So that was a long rambling. This was my stream. Again, shout out to Austin for sponsoring tonight's stream. Major shout out to Austin. Thumbs up for Austin. Thank you, brother, for sponsoring this stream. Thank you for your support. I truly do appreciate it, brother. And this was a great topic. There's so much that can be discussed and explained within this comic. So I really appreciate you sponsoring the stream. I really appreciate you, asking me to really dive into this, because there's no other way. I would have never have, except for you asking me to and sponsoring this stream. And I hope this was useful for other people, because once you kind of put all these dots together, once you see the dots and you connect the lines, you can see the bigger picture, right? That's exactly what children do. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. That's what this channel does. That's what Jay Dyer does. That's what anybody who's trying to spread truth, we live in chaos. And so when you can feel it, when the dots connect and you can see the bigger picture, it resonates. You know it's true. You can feel it. And that is the goal. And that is what we're all trying to do. So thank you, Austin, for supporting tonight's stream. Thank you for sponsoring it, brother. I hope that it was useful. I hope you feel like you got your money's worth. Again, it was a lot of fun, and I hope that this was useful for everybody. There's a lot of topics again for tonight's stream that we were discussing, whether it be again magic and sex and Kundalini, the god of Promethea, the non-duality, the non-personal dimension. Right? Why is it that gods in these worldviews are always non-personal? Because personhood itself comes from the Trinity, one essence, three persons. And so the God that these people worship isn't personal because it's not a person, because it's lost the image of God, of which you and I are the image of God. Mankind is the image of God, right? And so that's why whenever these worldviews want to worship some apersonal, abstract concept of God, stay far away, because this is the worship of darkness. Whether it be the tree of life, whether it be Kabbalah, in aspects of tarot, this stuff is not about self-liberation. It's actually about self-enslavement, enslavement to your passions, enslavement to your desires. And again, Alan Moore is totally indicative of this himself. A broken family, him and his wife having a communal girlfriend, of which his wife leaves him for the girlfriend. And so his daughters then are raised by a woman who's now a lesbian. Total breakdown. This is not good for children. This is not good for people's mental health. This is the society we're moving into, and it is about magic, because magic is really all about power. And again, whether it be Michel Foucault or postmodern understandings, the only thing that really exists to these people, whether they believe it or not, is power, because truth is relative. As Alan Moore said, femininity, masculinity, these are social constructions. And Christianity for him turned gold into lead. And so magic for him is turning lead back into gold. But for us, it's a false gold. It's a black gold. And it's not coal. It's not oil. It's death. It's death. So again, thank you, Austin. I hope everybody enjoyed the stream. Please smash that like if you can. I'm now going to dive into some of the super chats. So thank you all very, very much. First super chat. Again, let me catch my breath there. I really got into it for a second. I wanted to say, again, I apologize for the stream that cut out. It looks like Streamlabs had a problem earlier. I started the stream and the stream totally cut out earlier. Apologize for that. Dr. Vagisil sends in our first super chat tonight, and he throws in $1 and says, atheists are seduced by the siren song of Satan. Ooh! That they can imagine themselves as all powerful in these comic books when they fail to understand the infinite power that God has to protect us. Amen to that. Amen to that. Thank you so much, Dr. Vagisil. And that's exactly right. Right? Satan lures us. So he says atheists are seduced by the siren song of Satan. Sirens are these mythological creatures. We talked about them in regards to our stream on mermaids and the mythology of mermaids. Sirens are these Greek mythological creatures that are basically like a mermaid that sings these beautiful songs, and that it developed due to sailors saying that they would hear these beautiful songs that these beautiful women would sing, and they're on, say, rocks, and it's nighttime, and the moon and the stars are shining, and they could see this woman in the distance sound beautiful, look beautiful. But when they got to the woman would grab them and drag them into the sea and kill them and take their gold and take their possessions. That's exactly what Satan does to us. Except our gold is our soul. Our gold is being made in the image of God. That is our gold. That is the value which we can never let go of. And so sirens or Satan, it's the same thing. It's these entities that lure us into false beauty and then take us and drown us and take the things that's most precious to us. Next super chat comes from Dr. Vagisil, again throws in $2 and says, comic book heroes comic book heroes have a strong effect on a group of people who have no father in their life or lack of safety. There is also stoking of racial tension with black heroes to fetishize Egyptian gods and necromancy rather than the God of Moses who beat them. Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. And we see the exact same thing in Promethea. So Sophie Bang, she's a white girl in New York City in 1999. Again, the whole thing, she's flat-chested, sort of not as sexual. But when she becomes Promethea, now she's got braided hair. She's Arab or black, Egyptian. Again, sort of a mocha skin, beautiful, feminine figure, nice hips, big butt, huge boobs. And she gets to then utilize her sort of sexual power. Again, sexual power is magical power. And that's what the whole world, this is the Jezebel spirit. This is what the world is trying to get everybody to fall victim to. And that's why you don't want to be a simp, because a simp is somebody who's falling victim to that Jezebel spirit. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's weakness. And the only way we can reorient the world, which again, I'm a Christian, I don't believe the world's going to get any better. It's going to get more chaotic. It's going to get more dark. So the only thing that we can do is focus on our own power, focus on the transcendent God, focus on the things that are most difficult, resisting, morality, our ethics, these things, following Christ is difficult. And just like working out, just like eating a healthy diet, just like reading books, everything that is worthwhile is difficult, but it has more meaning. And so falling victim to these things is only going to get you in a deeper and deeper rut. Next super chat comes to us from Dr. Vagisil, throws in another $6. And he says, it seems that so much media from comic books to movies have occult undertones. Is it possible to really avoid all these things because Hollywood is downstream from culture and a lot of friends ostracize you for not engaging with these things? Well, it's true. I'm a terrible person with movies. I am so outside of the cultural milieu. I really don't watch that many movies unless it's recommended to me by somebody. And yeah, so he says much of media, comic books to movies have occult undertones. It's totally true. And that's why a lot of this stuff, just female sexual empowerment, the idea that a woman's going to sort of leverage her sex with multiple partners, can manipulate men through her sex, this is a Jezebel spirit. And again, King Ahab, read about Jezebel and King Ahab. King Ahab was a weak dude. He was a simp. His wife controlled him. Jezebel dominated him, and Jezebel got Israel to worship Baal and get back to child sacrifice. That's what these women do, bro. They are sacrificing their own kids. It's the same thing. Again, that's where I can agree with Alan Moore. It is a sort of recapitulation of a sort of fractal element of history and reality, but they're on the wrong side of it. The fact he thinks that the intelligence agencies and the FBI are in opposition to occult and spiritual practices that he's in favor of, give me a break, dude. They're freaking, they're the ones that are hiding the Jeffrey Epstein. They're the ones that participated in Epstein Island. The Mossad, the intelligence agencies, give me a break, dude. You're not in opposition. You're with the spirit of this world. And so is it possible to really avoid all these things because Hollywood is downstream of culture and a lot of friends ostracize you for not engaging with these things? Look, if your friend's going to ostracize you because you don't watch Hollywood movies and stuff, good, bro. Like, for me, I am so explicit in my faith and my orthodoxy and me following Christ. Now, again, I'm a little bit further. I'm 4 years into this journey of totally changing my life. And so I built a lot of momentum. But I tell you what, the people are going to leave your life, but the right people are going to stay in your life. And that momentum is going to drag and bring in the right people in your life. So don't be afraid of losing friends because you don't engage in Hollywood nonsense. I'm telling you, it's only going to be better for you. That if they get out of your life and you get the real people, the real G's, if you want, dude, it's only better because those are the people you really want. Because people who are honest, people who understand what's going on, people who actually connected with God, people who have something that they're willing to die for, their family, their religion, their values, those are the only people you want on your team. People who are only self-serving, people who really care about what Hollywood is doing or comic, forget them. Forget them. You don't need them. You don't need them at all. wish them the best, pray for them, tell them where you're going. If they're on your level, good. If they're not, forget them. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Vagisil, for your super chats. He gave $1, then $2, talking about the comic books and the fetishization of Egyptian gods and necromancy. And then Dr. Vagisil sent in $6. Really appreciate it, brother. Next super chat comes from Genghis Khan. Shout out to Genghis Khan. God bless you, brother. Throws in $9.99. I truly appreciate your support, man. Genghis Khan, longtime supporter of the stream. I truly appreciate you, man. God bless. Next super chat comes from Amptown 1. Shout out to Amptown 1. Amptown 1. I hope to see you at church Sunday. It's been a pleasure to see you joining our parish and participating in fellowship. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate your support, and I really appreciate your friendship. I'm glad that you, again, if I've helped you in any way, give glory to God. It's not me. It's me just trying to do what I believe I'm obligated to do. I'm a slave in a way to Christ, right? I got to do what I do. So it's been a pleasure to meet you. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. It's been a pleasure to see you coming to church on Sundays. God bless you. And I hope to see you again this Sunday. And maybe we can talk a little bit more. Sorry, this past Sunday, I was a little bit preoccupied with people, so we weren't able to sit and chit chat as much. But again, Amptown 1 throws in $10. Thank you so much, Amptown 1. And she says, trying to catch up to Dr. Vagisil? God bless you, brother. Well, thank you so much, Amptown 1. It's true. Dr. Vagisil is the man, and he's always helping me out. So thank you so much, Amptown 1, for the support. Next super chat comes from The Real Cooter Brown, throws in $5. And he says, I really enjoyed the Atlantis stream. It just might be your best one yet. God bless and keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much, The Real Cooter Brown. I'm glad that you enjoyed that. Again, that was another sponsored stream. That was, again, shout out to Meta Ninjas. Meta Ninjas wanted me to do a deep dive into Atlantis. And that's what I did there on that last stream. So I hope that it was useful for you guys. Shout out to Austin for sponsoring this stream. He wanted me to do a deep dive into the comic book Promethea, of which was, this is really interesting. I thought, like I said earlier, he wanted me to just read the first 5 issues of the comic. No, he wanted me to read the whole series. I did not realize that. So last night, Jay was streaming. And so I was going to do this stream last night. But because Jay was streaming, I couldn't do it. It totally destroyed my audience. So I said, okay, I'll do it tomorrow night. That afforded me a time to basically get through the entirety of the Promethea books that he had on his Comicology app. So again, thank you so much, Austin, for the support, man. I really do appreciate it. God bless you, brother. And so, Real Cooter Brown, thank you very much, brother, for your $5 super chat. And I appreciate your support. And I'm really glad that you enjoyed the Atlantis stream. Next super chat comes from our buddy, our Orthodox brother, Keenan Beats. Shout out to Keenan Beats. Love you, man. God bless you. We need to catch up. Want to make sure everything's going good in your life, man. Keep on making music. You are incredibly talented, man. God is using you for your own purposes. And Keenan throws in $5 and says, thanks, bro. Well, thank you, Keenan. Again, the opening music for today's stream is all from Keenan, Keenan Beats. So give him a shout out. If you see him on Instagram, look up Keenan Beats. Give him some love, man. He's one of our good musicians here in the Orthodox sphere. Next super chat comes from Kingdom Kid, throws in $4.99, and she says, just an update, still in catechism classes, still studying my required materials, falling deeper and deeper into Christ each day. God bless you. Well, Kingdom Kid, that is wonderful. Truly love to hear that. Thank you so much. And that's just wonderful. I'm glad that you're still in catechism. You're learning more and more and more. I believe it's your daughter. Again, forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to recollect the last time that you updated me on you becoming a catechism, or a catechesis, I should say, entering catechesis and being a catechumen. I believe it was you and your young daughter. So God bless you both. I hope you continue to learn. I hope this stream was edifying, and do not do sigil magic. Do not do it. But I hope that it was something that you were able to learn from. And thank you so much for the $4.99 and the support. I truly do appreciate it. Next super chat comes from Storm the Cat, throws in $5 and says, some of David Bowie's music is about Kabbalah. It's sad because some of his music is really good, but I think his final album, Black Black Star is literally satanic. This album gives a sense of pure evil and dread. Well, that could very much could be the case. Storm the Cat. I'm not familiar. I haven't listened to a lot of David Bowie. Was never a big David Bowie fan myself. But if you'd like me to dive into the Black Star album, that maybe that'd be a sponsored stream. Again, anybody who would like to sponsor a stream, if you would, again, if you're in a position and you can and you would like to, you can do so right here with this link. We have one more sponsored stream coming, of which I'm going to be diving into Oswald Spengler's Man in Technics. I'm really excited to dive into this book. So I got to read all this. I'm going to read all this book, and then I'm going to break it down for you guys in our next sponsored stream. I'm hoping to maybe do that Sunday or Tuesday of next week, so you can look out for either Sunday or Tuesday. You'll be seeing a stream on Man in Technics by Oswald Spengler, and that's our next sponsored stream. So thank you so much, Storm the Cat. Next super chat comes from Eleni, Greek Orthodox. Shout out to Eleni. Hey, I love your Instagram page. I share your stuff all the time. Keep on doing your thing, sister. Again, you get it. You connect the dots. But I truly appreciate your support as well. She sends in 20 Canadian bucks. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much, Eleni, Greek Orthodox. Again, like I said, she has no comment, but again, I love your Instagram page. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep spreading the truth, and God bless you. And then the next super chat comes from Dr. Vagisil, throws in $1 and says, icons should be the imagery that should replace comic books for kids. The fantastic obstacles that the saints overcome through Christ are more interesting than the masturbations of Alan Moore redirecting the imagination of the youth to heavenly things. Dr. Vagisil, I could not agree more. And that's, again, why in God's providence, he gave us orthodoxy. He gave us icons. It's all providence. And so looking at these sort of surreal understandings of these comic books again, and I will give it to Promethea. It is a very vibrant, colorful, interesting aesthetic to look at, but it's replete with magical symbols. It's replete with esoteric lore. It's things that, again, can entrap the young mind of a child if they don't know what they're looking at. I mean, literally, the main protagonist is sleeping with a magician who does a ritual to cover up how he really looks, and he's talking about his dick as a magic wand and this or that. Like, it's not good. And so we don't need kids looking at this stuff. And Alan Moore is a weirdo. But again, I look at myself. How sad is it that I used to be really into Alan Moore and I used to promote his stuff? It's pathetic. It's not good. Redirecting the imagination of the youth to heavenly things. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think more people, if they understood how they can utilize icons and how they can utilize aspects of the church, that, we can give that to our children. And again, these are real lives. These aren't mythologies. It's supernatural and it's historical. It's exactly what Alan Moore wants to show with Promethea, except our saints are real. Our saints are real people, and they weren't perfect. They were sinners. The saint of my church, St. Mary of Egypt, was a nympho. She was a prostitute. She loved sex. She couldn't help herself, but encountering divine, righteous, pious men, she turned her way. She became an ascetic. She lived in the desert, and she is now a saint. She is a saint of the church. There's always salvation and redemption for us sinners. Raymond Cannon throws in $5 and says, Christ our Lord bless and keep you. Well, thank you so much, Raymond Cannon, for the $5 super chat. I truly do appreciate it, brother. God bless you as well, and thank you for your support. And it looks like the last and final super chat comes from Dr. Vagisil, who throws in $3 and says, Candace Spence is one of my frequent patients, and I'm redirecting her money towards your work. I'm not a real doctor, so patient-doctor confidentiality. Yeah, that's definitely a HIPAA violation, Dr. Vagisil, but I know Candace Spence, and she is not one of your patients. So shout out to Candace Spence. If she's still here, God bless you, Candace Spence. You're awesome. I really do appreciate your friendship as well. I hope everything's going well in Canada. I hope that, your new location, school, life, generally speaking, I hope everything's going good, sister. Thank you for your support. Again, I know this super chat isn't yours, but he brought your name up. So thank you, sister, for the support. God bless you, Candace. I wish you nothing but the best, and I look forward to the next time we chat. So God bless you, Candace. God bless everybody up in Canada. Times are tough everywhere. So shout out to all my Canadians. Shout out to Thomas Henderson. Shout out to Christopher. Shout out to Candace. Shout out to all my Canadian brothers and sisters. Anyways, I'm going to hop off here. Thank you all for the support. Thank you all for being here. Please smash that like. And like I said, I will be back Friday. I have a topic I'd like to do on Islam. Maybe doing Orthodoxy versus New Age and Magic. Maybe that would be a good one. But anyways, I will be back Friday night. I will see you all then. God bless you all. And also, if you see any clips from this stream that you would like, remember, tag my streams, tag clips. That way I can start making clips. I can start making reels. I can start making stuff for TikTok and Instagram. If you see something that you like, let me know in the comments so I can start clipping things. So anyways, love you all. Thank you all so much for the support. And as always, until next time, God bless.